Chapter 251 Growth, 1. Time flowed like the wind. It could be called the most confusing time since the tower was created. Everyone was so out of it that they asked, "It's already been that long?" The events were rough enough to be felt by the normal players on the lower floors, and even those who had retired. With the Summer Queen's collapse, the existence of the Red Dragon was in danger. Countless hunters threatened them. The Bloodland ripped them apart the most voraciously, and the Devil Army began to hunt the 81 Eyes. The Elohim allied themselves with the Sea of Time and attempted to invade the 76th floor. Other than that, other large and small clans invaded the Red Dragon's territories spread throughout the tower, and the Red Dragon was in extreme danger. However, the Red Dragon was still the Red Dragon. Even though the Summer Queen was gone, they had a strong and firm history. Bai Waltz stood out the most, having taken over the Red Dragon. After revealing herself in the war with the One-Horned Tribe, she also contributed a lot in other places. She was skilled at both Mujang and magic, and on the battlefield, she always left victorious. She was lacking compared to the Summer Queen, but she definitely didn't fall short of the 9 Kings. And after the Red Dragon ended a battle in stalemate on the 76th floor against 3 other groups, they weren't a toothless tiger, but a beast with sharp claws. Thanks to this, although the Red Dragon had suffered a lot of damage, they were able to remain as the ever-strongest clan. However, the real problem followed. Just when Bai Waltz was breathing out a sigh of relief having defended the 76th floor well, the other 9 Dragon Sons attacked her. Waltz had one-sidedly lost, tired from all the fighting, and she was barely able to escape with a few of her followers. The 9 Dragon Sons clashed again for the empty throne. It was a rebellion. Each of them only thought of being king. The 81 Eyes and other martial squads were split, following different masters, and comrades who had been fighting side by side not too long ago stabbed each other in the chest. And when another day passed, the Red Dragon was split into 3. The White Dragon of Waltz, who was nicknamed Spring Queen. The Black Dragon of Tom, the Autumn Lord, who had been the youngest but suddenly grew after swallowing his brothers. The weakest 3, Hyal, Liso, and Baratan, made up the Green Dragon. The 76th floor that had just settled down was split into 3, and they entered a war of eating each other up. As if to match this, the other large clans attempted changes of their own. This whirlwind of confusion couldn't even be compared to when the Chang'e Wado fell, swallowed up the players and medium clans. New clans appeared from swallowing each other up, and some were even enough to threaten the 8 large clans. Tens of new players became rankers every day. Now, in the world of the tower, the sword was the law. Upheaval. If everything could be explained with one word, that was it. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Although most of the tower was in confusion, it wasn't like that everywhere. The One-Horned Tribe continued to live their daily lives, outside of the range of the whirlwind. With the sudden disappearance of the Bow God, things became quiet again. It was also the same with Yeon-woo's party. Yeon-woo and Brahm created an antidote for Ananta based on what Viera Dune's shedding had said. All this time, the Walpurgis Nacht had put too many different drugs inside Ananta to provide a vessel, so a considerably long time was required. And after a few months, Brahm finished the antidote. Seeing his daughter's quivering eyelashes, Brahm had all kinds of thoughts. What should he say when she opens her eyes? Should he tell her that she'll be all right? Or should he silently stroke her head? Wouldn't it be best to show her how healthily she had grown up? No, what if she still hated him? But all these thoughts vanished when Ananta opened her eyes. Ananta. Brahm gripped Ananta's hand. She looked so pitiful lying there, barely breathing through the mask. He felt like crying. During times like this, he hated that his body was a homunculus. He wanted to cry and share his warmth, but he couldn't. However, Ananta's eyes didn't focus on anything. Her eyes just emptily looked forward. Her consciousness was definitely back. Concern flashed through Brahm's eyes. Yeon-woo, who was behind him, stiffened. Brahm's concern became a reality. After pulling Ananta out from the capsule, Braun focused on healing Ananta. Thankfully, she made progress, enough to be noticeable in weeks. However, Ananta still wasn't able to wake up completely. She could eat with someone's help and even walk. But that was it. She just blankly sat still the entire day. She couldn't speak or recognize people, not even she. No one knew why. Everyone just guessed that it was from the trauma. Even with mental therapy, she didn't improve. Because of that, Brahm painfully spent his days next to Ananta. He wondered if this was karma from the heavens. It was a punishment for not taking care of his daughter because of his greed. But if they wanted to punish him, they should have hurt him, not his daughter. He continued feeling like it was his fault, so he was pained. Seeing him, Yeon-woo also felt empty. If only I knew a bit earlier. Yeon-woo's fingers flinched. If this was Earth, he would have smoked a cigarette. He had never been so desperate for a cigarette since he entered the tower. That was how frustrated he was. For the first time, Yeon-woo received a bottle of alcohol from the head elder. Clang! The bottle and his flask clinked against each other. The alcohol tasted bitter. He was about to pour back the second glass, but a hand suddenly popped out to stop him. He lifted his head. Fanti and Edora were pouting. "What are you doing pathetically by yourself? You have to drink with other people." Fanti took the flask from Yeon-woo and drank it himself, sitting opposite of Yeon-woo. Edora silently filled Yeon-woo's glass. Yeon-woo just watched the alcohol being poured. He could see he was wearing a mask in his reflection, but he could feel that he was smiling bitterly inside of it. Even he could see it, so there was no way Fanti and Edora wouldn't see it. However, the two didn't ask Yeon-woo for the reason. They just silently sat next to him. They raised their glasses and drank together. Yeon-woo was able to slowly clear his messy mind. Even after entering the tower, he didn't know of Sha's existence. He also didn't know what kind of things Brahm and Ananta had suffered through. He didn't even want to imagine what kind of things Vieradoon did. How would you know that? It's not like you have the 1,000 Li eyes like Alforoni or can predict the future like the three Norns. That's right. Don't take it to heart. Shannon and Han Ryeong tried to cheer Yeon-woo up, but Yeon-woo couldn't toss his thoughts away. If only he had been a bit faster. If only he had rushed a little to save Ananta. To stop Vieradoon. Then, he wouldn't have to show Sha her sick mother. His despair and regret turned to other thoughts. If I was stronger. This was all because he was weak. If he was just a little stronger, he wouldn't have had to spend more time on the lower floors. He would have been able to save Sha and Ananta faster. Of course, he had had these thoughts in the past too. If only he was stronger, he could finish his revenge. And he could destroy the tower like he wanted to. However, this time, the reason was a bit different. I have to become a roof. Unlike in the beginning, when he was by himself, his surroundings were filled with his people. Brahm, Ananta, Shay. His faithful servants, Shannon, Han Ryeong, Rebecca, and Bu. Fanti and Edora and Galliard. The Martial King was now his special teacher, and the One-Horned Tribe was his family. Revenge was revenge, but now, he had to protect the people around him. A fence, or a roof. He wanted to become that kind of being. That was the Martial King. Even while fighting the Summer Queen, he was strong enough to protect the tribe. The other tribe members had supported him so he could focus on the fight. They believed in each other, and they gave each other their backs. Looking at that scene, Yeon-woo had a thought. He wanted to be like that too. He wanted to become a fence to protect those around him, and they would protect his back in return. He dreamed of such a scene. On one side, he was worried that he would end up like his brother and Arthea, but like what his brother said in his diary, he didn't want to be an embarrassing brother. Also, he wanted to prove that his brother was right for believing in his friends and lover. He wanted to protect himself and his people. This thought was strongly stamped in his head. Yeon-woo confessed his thoughts to everyone. Why are you suddenly being so cringy? My toes are curling up. We are bound to you. Please walk the path you want to. Even though Shannon's talking like that, that's not how he really feels. We'll always silently be by your side. Shannon and Han Ryeong replied like themselves. Ahem. I was wondering what you were doing in the middle of the night. So that's what it was. Goodness. Oraboni. Do you remember what I said last time? I want to share your burden. Fanti shook his head like he didn't know why Yeon-woo had been so concerned about that, and Eudora carefully looked into Yeon-woo's eyes. Looking into her sparkling eyes, Yeon-woo remembered a voice. I wanted to see what kind of burden you were carrying. Would it be wrong if I wanted to share that with you? The day that he had collapsed after the fight with Agars on the 23rd floor, Eudora had pulled Yeon-woo close and told him that if he really considered them his little siblings, he should share his burden. Yeon-woo said that he would tell them someday. And now, the day had come. Chapter 252 Growth, 2. Yeon-woo took his mask off in front of them without any preamble. It might have been from the influence of the alcohol, but he didn't have any regrets. This was the first time he showed them his face of his own volition. Eudora smiled with a nod, and Fanti looked at Yeon-woo with surprised eyes. Heaven Wing. Yeon-woo began to tell them his story. Thinking of what happened that day, his emotions raged inside of him, but he didn't show it. He spoke like it was someone else's story. Fanti was the one to break the calm. He pumped his chest with his fist like he was furious, and he even slammed his glass down. Edora's eyes shook hearing the story, which was more serious than she thought, but she shut her mouth and didn't say anything. Visit No. V. Elb. I. N for the best novel reading experience. And father? Does father know this? Yeon-woo shook his head. I never told him. He's only interested in his own business. Does it make sense that he doesn't know his disciple went through something like this? Fanti shot up from his seat. This won't do. What are you gonna do? Why are you asking me that? You're now a member of our tribe. Your business is the tribe's business. You went through such horrible things, so does it make sense that the tribe leader is sitting his butt down sipping tea? He looked like he was going to dash out. Before Yeon-woo could stop him, Eudora shouted. Sit down, you bastard! What? Bastard! Eudora, who had been trying to act demure in front of Yeon-woo, wasn't able to control her emotions this time. Fanti was shocked. But Eudora continued to shout with squinted eyes. Yet! Bastard! Do you really think father doesn't know about this? Fanti closed his mouth. The martial king focused on the village, pretending like he didn't care about the ongoings of the world, but his eyes and ears were always open. He resembled his father, but Fanti couldn't deny that his father was sly. Also, their mother, the psychic medium, was always next to him. You still don't know? Father is giving Oraboni a chance so he can fly using his own wings. He's protecting him from his natural enemies. Fanti suddenly felt sober. He just plopped down and tipped his glass back down again. His sister was always logical, he didn't know why he was so fiery all the time. Father knows that Oraboni will leave the nest one day. He also wants to see Oraboni finish things on his own. Fanti nodded his head. The Yeon-woo he had seen so far definitely wasn't someone to stay inside the tribe. Suddenly, Fanti became curious why someone who hadn't said anything all this time was suddenly telling them everything. Fanti stared at Yeon-woo like he was going to eat him up. He didn't ask anything, but he looked at Yeon-woo with fierce eyes, as if compelling him to tell them the truth. Yeon-woo knew what the question in Fanti's eyes was. He tipped back the alcohol. He could feel something hot moving down his throat. It had a high alcohol content, but strangely, he felt wide awake. Tack. Yeon-woo spoke the truth that he had been pushing down all this time. Want you to become my wings. Wings. Fanti looked blankly at Yeon-woo. However, Yeon-woo could see the expectation that was burning in Fanti's eyes because Fanti liked cheesy things. Yeon-woo clenched his fists and continued. Yet. Wings. Like I said, what I'm going to be doing in the future is useless. It's fighting with the tower itself. That's why it's hard for me to tell you guys to help me. Also, your tribe. Hyung. Fanti picked his ear like he was bored and cut Yeon-woo off. What? Woo. The substance on Fanti's finger flew off as he blew it with a smile. In times like this, all you have to say is one thing. Help. And here I was, wondering why you looked so serious. You were always so curt and made people feel frustrated. I see you're also someone with a lot of words, huh? He. Fanti chuckled, shoulders shaking up and down. Eudora nodded as she looked at Yeon-woo. Yeon-woo heard her voice echoing in his head again. I want to share your burden. Yeon-woo silently closed his eyes. He only had one thing to say to the two. Thanks. It was something he had felt for a long time, but the best thing he had done since entering the tower was meeting the two. Fanti scratched his nose that was either red from embarrassment or the alcohol. He gulped down the rest of his glass. K. You don't have to worry about anything else. Father will take care of the tribe even if he doesn't have us, and who cares if someone else takes over the successor's spot. I can just give it to them. It was such a Fanti-like thing to say. Fanti grinned mischievously. Also, if you're born a man, you should have the courage to fight with the world. Kia. It's awesome when I say it. But I'm a girl, Eudora said jokingly. Why are you a girl? Do you want to die? Your precious Oroboni is watching. I'll talk to you later. Ha. I'll talk to you now, little sister. Fanti burst out laughing, not caring if Eudora glared at him. Eudora ground her teeth and promised herself that she would punish him when the influence of alcohol was gone. She looked back at Yeon-woo with a calm face. But Oroboni, what are you planning on doing from now? Didn't you bring this up because you have something to say? Yeon-woo nodded his head. I have plans to make a clan. Their eyes widened. Clan. I see you're trying to establish an organization first. Since that's the most important part. We'll only get somewhere after we have a foundation. He. And we're the founding members. Fanti laughed with amusement. But we only have a small number of members, and it'll be hard to create one right away since we're not prepared. What should we do about that? Fanti shut his lips. Become strong enough until we can't be crushed, regardless of who pushes you down. You're telling us to become stronger so we're not an embarrassment to you. That's a bit hurtful to my pride. Fanti shot up from where he was sitting. His eyes shined like they were on fire. It's a good thing, actually. I hate being a burden. You told me to become your wings, right? I'll become your teeth, not your wings, so you should work hard too. You might be swallowed up by me. They were done drinking. Fanti spun around and left. Eudora bowed to Yeon-woo and followed after Fanti. Sitting there alone, Yeon-woo drank the last of what was left in his glass. Tack. The sound of his glass clicking on the table felt loud. Chapter 253 Growth, 3. After that day, the party was busy, like the rest of the tower. Boo focused on making the dungeon, and Brahm was busy healing Ananta and restoring the outer space. Shannon and Han Ryeong gave their all on understanding the Monkey King's inheritance and Rebecca on recovering her holy power. Everyone agreed with what Yeon-woo said, and they realized many things from the war with the Red Dragon. We're still weak. They had all contributed a lot in the war. However, they had only taken advantage of the confusing situation. There was almost nothing they did with their own strength. They realized that the world they knew was small. Han Ryeong, who had been the saber god, found that his peak wasn't worth anything after watching the martial king's battle. Also, through this war, Yeon-woo had clearly revealed himself to the world. Now, he wasn't a rookie to look forward to but someone to be wary of. Because of that, it was hard to make plans like they had until now. A lot of people would be watching and bothering them. To protect Yeon-woo from those dangers, they had to become stronger first. Everyone focused on their individual training. No one said anything about climbing the tower. One could climb the tower anytime, but having the time to train was rare. Yeon-woo also focused on his training. He looked over his skills and powers again, and worked hard to completely master the third step awakening. His desire for the sword became greater. On the 20th floor, he had continued to train after learning aura, but unlike magic, he didn't make that much progress with the sword. Shannon and Han Ryeong gave him advice for this. Most people think that they arrive at the end of martial arts once they can create aura. That's a ridiculous thought. Aura isn't the destination. It's the beginning, because that's when you learn what the meaning of the sword is. If you're proud of merely knowing the meaning, you won't grow. The two had walked different paths, but what they were saying was the same. This was only the beginning. They said that expanding his knowledge of the sword and engraving it into his body was the most important. Then what should I do to know its meaning? Extend your consciousness onto the sword. It's not just focusing on your sword, you have to become one with it. Then, you'll be able to complete the body that you want. Yeon-woo understood the gist of what that meant. Becoming one with the sword. The one-horned tribe called it the body and sword as one. The public said that the peak of the sword was becoming an expert. From then, Yeon-woo began to train his sword again. Wrong. The grid always shook like it was glad to see him. Every day, Yeon-woo did his best to focus his consciousness on the blade. A few months flashed by like that. *******. Time difference. Extrasensory perception. In the slower world, Yeon-woo swung his sword again for the millionth time. This was the world of his consciousness, where time ran 10 times slower than the rest of the world, so he was now familiar with the movement. All of his consciousness was absorbed into his sword. Aura occasionally sparked and was bound to his consciousness. Strong energy. Aura had various forms, but they were all called aura blades. You were already a master being able to use aura, so sword users only focused on refining their aura and didn't think beyond that. However, the one-horned tribe split this into 3 different categories. Sword energy, strong energy, and formless strong energy. Formless strong energy was also called consciousness strong energy, and it was still too far for Yeon-woo to reach. However, strong energy was different. After Yeon-woo's thorough efforts, he was able to use sword energy easily. He was working on moving on to the next step. The power of concentrating your magic circle and fixing it with your consciousness, strong energy. Yeon-woo wanted to accomplish this and chased again and again after someone in the world of his consciousness. The Palgui and martial extremes. The power that the martial king had used against the summer queen. Yeon-woo had thought of it so many times that he could clearly replicate the fight with his eyes closed. The king of martial arts. The man truly deserving the honorable name. If Yeon-woo could touch the martial king's feet, he would be able to escape the limits of where he was. Pyong. The strong energy that gathered at his blade lost its form, and time sped up again. Yeon-woo let go of his sword from the pain of being flicked out into the world and was pushed back from where he was standing. It's still not working. He clicked his tongue seeing his bloodied right hand. Dragon's blood circulated to quickly close his wound. It was his regeneration skill. The past few months had been torture to Yeon-woo. On the 5 mountains of penances, he had also worked this much, but there, he was limited by the penances, so he was able to grow quickly. This time, he couldn't. He had to test the limits of his body and focus on mastering it, so it was an endless cycle of boredom. There was only one movement: striking his sword down. Although he was putting his consciousness on it, repeating the same movement thousands of times made him feel like he was going to go crazy. Of course, Yeon-woo didn't just train his sword. In fact, Yeon-woo learned a lot during all this time. The demonic dragon body with the dragon's blessing and the demon's blessing. The philosopher's stone in his cores. The third step awakening he had forced open on the 21st floor. His body quickly grew, but his consciousness couldn't catch up. He didn't know where his limits were and what his potential was. That was why he used time difference and pushed himself to the extremes. At first, it had been effective. Occasionally, he would awake his powers and break through his limits. He did it because he trusted in the ability of the regeneration skill. He was able to gain the most from the bloodline magic that Brahm advised him about. Of course, he only learned the basics and used it with his rune magic. He didn't even think of touching the harder ones, leaving it to Boo. Even with just that, Yeon-woo had changed noticeably. But for some time, he had been blocked by a large wall. His magic growth paused, and his body didn't change. The only thing he had left was the sword. He had arrived at his last limit. The problem was after this. He no longer grew. It would have been nice if he made a little progress, but there wasn't anything like that. The wall was too high. He had swung his sword against it again and again, but he failed every time. Everything was useless. Yeon-woo wasn't strong enough to aim for the Palgui or the martial extremes. However, he was at the beginning. He could begin to learn it, and this was done using strong energy. But he failed too. He had enough magic power, his body was enough, and his level was enough. He definitely put enough of his consciousness on it too. However, he was missing one thing. He just didn't know what it was. He went to the Martial King for advice, but he only received an unclear answer. It's because it's not your path. Yeon-woo didn't understand what that meant. What do you mean, sir? Figure it out on your own. The Martial King didn't give him an answer and just smirked. Yeon-woo sighed. It wasn't just this time he felt the Martial King's teachings were like this. Whenever he asked a question, the Martial King just told him a vague answer and told him to figure it out himself. Yeon-woo knew he needed to make his own path, but he would have liked it if the Martial King was a bit nicer. Although he'd probably never be nice. In fact, since he knew that he would gain more if he heard this kind of answer, he couldn't complain. Looking back at it now, the Martial King's answers were always to the point. He's probably not saying I'm unfit for the sword. He wouldn't have tried to teach me the yin sword if so. Then what is it? Is he saying strong energy doesn't fit me? That's probably not it either. Palgui? The martial extremes? Or am I just doing it wrong? Yeon-woo just felt frustrated. He had used all kinds of hidden pieces to get where he was and forced time difference to improve himself. There were only a few obstacles when he learned aura. He had struggled this hard. That was why the wall was even scarier to Yeon-woo. He didn't know what he should do from now. It wasn't like he could absorb additional dragon's blessings or demon's blessings. His body was at the right balance for the third step awakening. If this balance was broken, his body could be destroyed. He also wanted to seek advice from Shannon and Han Ryong, but they had been silent for a while. They were also focused on their individual training deep inside his shadow. Yeon-woo wasn't able to find the answer. The time came for him to sit down blankly and organize his thoughts. He felt extremely dejected. He coincidentally met Galliard, who was holding a basket that was filled to the brim, while going to the forest. "What are you doing here? You look so depressed. What are you doing here? What's that in your hand?" Yeon-woo's words faded away. He realized that he had only spoken to Brahm and Sha after entering the village. He hadn't spoken with Galliard recently. He didn't know what he was up to these days, and the same probably went for Galliard. Yeon-woo quickly answered with a smile so Galliard didn't feel upset. I wasn't making any progress with my training. I was in the middle of figuring things out. Oh, this? Actually, these days, Sha has been really picky. I was researching how to make vegetables tasty. Galliard grinned looking at the fruits and vegetables in his basket. There probably wasn't anyone who was more attentive to Sha than Galliard. Brahm was busy with Ananta, and Yeon-woo focused on his training. These days, the time he spent with Sha had decreased. On the other hand, Galliard was busy taking care of Sha's diet and all kinds of other things. The daughter he had before he came to this world was about that age, so Galliard was attentive to Sha. His greatest interest was Sha's pickiness for food. Galliard was an elf from birth, so he only ate vegetables, and Brahm didn't eat meat frequently. On the other hand, Sha couldn't get enough of it. Of course the adult menu wouldn't taste good for her. Try mixing bean meat inside the meat. Last time I snuck it in there and she liked it. Bean meat? What's that? Grinding beans to make it look like meat. It tastes like meat, and with some sauce on it, the smell of the beans isn't noticeable. Oh. I can do that? Can you teach me how to make bean meat? Yeon-woo needed some rest from his thinking so he nodded. It wasn't that hard to make anyway. He followed Galliard into Brahm's house, and Sha ran over to him. Unclee. Ah, our cute little puppy. Were you reading? Yeon-woo lifted Sha. In Sha's right hand, there was a book that was the size of her head. Was the title of the book? It was a book they had stolen from the Summer Queen. Yet. I'm reading it well. I'm a good girl. But, uncle. Yes. Hee. Are you here to play with me today? Yeon-woo smiled bitterly looking at Sha, whose eyes sparkled. It seemed he had been too indifferent these days. His frustration was swept away when he saw his niece so happy to see him. She had missed Ananta so much, but she wasn't able to speak with her. He should have come here more often. Yet. I came to play with you. Are you going to eat too? Yet. Woo. That's a relief. Sha put her tiny hand on her chest and breathed out in relief. She was so cute that Yeon-woo laughed. Why? You always make yummy food. The food that Galliard makes me is bad. Galliard gripped his heart with a hurt face. Sha just smiled, not caring. Yeon-woo stroked Sha's head. Her tail wagged on the floor. She was as lovable as a puppy. Asterisk. Thanks for the tip. Haha. After the meal, Sha fell asleep. Galliard lightly stroked Sha's head and chuckled. Sha didn't know, but 1/3 of the stir-fried pork she ate today was made of beans. She might notice it, so you have to adjust the amount carefully. Got it. It seems like I'll have to use the sauce well too. It was a nice meal, and the texture was good, too. Yeon-woo nodded and pinched Sha's cheek. Her chubby cheeks rose up and down. She was tightly holding onto Yeon-woo's forefinger as she slept. Yeon-woo's face was all smiles. He always smiled when he looked at Sha. He pressed Sha's other cheek with another finger. Sha slightly groaned and frowned in her sleep. She was such an angel. It's interesting every time I see it. What is? Yeon-woo playfully teased Sha while she was sleeping and lifted his head at what Galliard said. You seem to have more emotions now. Before, you were just cold. You have these caring sides of you too. Yeon-woo smiled sourly. I think it's because of Sha. Because of Sha? Yes. I can't just show a stiff side of myself to her. I suppose so. Sha is pretty cute after all. I heard she's loved by all the boys in the village. Is that so? No uncle would be mad that his niece was popular. no. He did feel a bit anxious actually. What if some fool received Sha's attention? Yeon-woo crinkled his face thinking of what to do if someone made Sha suffer. Then, he lightly laughed. Galliard was right. Even when he was in the tutorial, he never had these thoughts. Right now, he only had one wish. It was for Ananta to wake up so she could hug Sha. He hoped that Sha's face wouldn't be dark anymore, like the gaze that Galliard and himself were giving her right now. Children at that age should just grow receiving the love of adults. Did you know? You changed a lot too. Me? Yes. Galliard smiled bitterly. He didn't deny the fact. In Sha, he had found happiness that he couldn't find in his old life. His lonely life as a hunter chasing Akasha snake was over. Out of Fanti, Edora, Brahm, Shannon, Han Ryeong, Rebecca, and Boo, he was the only person who was relaxed. Galliard wanted to say that this was all because of Yeon-woo and Jeong-woo, but he changed the subject because he felt shy. But why were you sitting blankly in the forest? You looked concerned about something. It's nothing. I'm saying this because it doesn't seem to be just nothing. I'm not one to delve into these things, but if you have something bothering you, you can tell me. I may not be able to solve it, but I can be a good listener. Tell me what's on your mind. Yeon-woo smiled bitterly. He hesitated. It wasn't that he was embarrassed, but he didn't know where to start. Everything was on the tip of his tongue. It was only after some time that Yeon-woo began to speak. His growth, hindered by a wall. The aura that disappeared. His evaporating consciousness. He felt a lot better after speaking about his concerns. But Galliard didn't say anything and was deep in thought. Yeon-woo looked at him with surprised eyes, not expecting an answer, and Galliard suddenly burst up. Since Sha's sleeping, wanna follow me to the backyard? Yeon-woo didn't know what Galliard was thinking, but he nodded his head and left the cottage with Galliard. In the backyard, Galliard plucked a branch from a persimmon tree. It was a thin branch that was as long as his arm. It looked weak, like it would break with just a touch. What was he trying to do? Yeon-woo quietly looked at Galliard, and Galliard swung the branch around and nodded with a satisfied face. Then, he pointed at Yeon-woo with the branch. Attack me. Yeon-woo's eyes widened. What are you? Like I said. Attack me. Let's return to when we were in the tutorial. Something that's different is that I'll fight back. But I won't use aura. Of course, you can use it. But just use the basics. What did Galliard want to do? Yeon-woo couldn't read his mind. He got that Galliard wanted to teach him something, but he couldn't guess what he was trying to do with the branch. This kind of fight didn't make sense. Yeon-woo was already stronger than most rankers. If he used his powers on top of that, he was confident he could fight against high rankers too. On the other hand, Galliard wasn't much different from when he was in the tutorial. He was at the level of a ranker. There was no way he could fight against Yeon-woo without using aura. However, Galliard just waved the branch at Yeon-woo to provoke him. Galliard was normally a quiet and calm person, so it seemed like he was trying to teach Yeon-woo something right now. Yeon-woo pulled out his magic bayonet. As he took a step forward, he aimed at Galliard's left stomach. It was an effect of the 8 extreme fists, moving the sword forward to change it into any direction necessary depending on the defense of his opponent. However, he was just about to counter the branch that was striking down on the magic bayonet, but the branch suddenly wrapped around the magic bayonet like rubber and swept across Yeon-woo's lower body. Pack! Yeon-woo fell forward from the intense pain. He felt numb. It had happened so fast that he didn't know what happened. What was the thing that twisted space, and how did the branch stretch out to hit him? There definitely wasn't any magic power in it, but his right leg throbbed. More than anything, what shocked Yeon-woo the most was, how is that possible? He had definitely followed it with his draconic eyes and extrasensory perception, but the speed of the branch was incomprehensible. It wasn't possible. It was like the branch wasn't a branch. While he was making all kinds of guesses, Galliard rested the branch on his shoulder and smiled faintly. Do you want to go again? Chapter 254 Growth, 4. Yeon-woo nodded and slowly stood up. Then, he got into position again, eyes narrowed. He didn't know what just happened with the attack. It was definitely a branch. But it also wasn't. It felt like it had turned into something completely different for a moment. Draconic eyes. Yeon-woo opened his eyes wide, thinking that another mysterious attack was about to come flying at him. Flaws twisted in the air like spider webs. After he had received more of the dragon's blessing, he was able to see more flaws. Walk. The branch moved through the flaws. It was slow, like before. It was just a normal tree branch. Yeon-woo didn't take his eyes off of the branch and kicked off from the ground. He wanted to avoid it and then face it head-on. Reading the change of the branch was his goal. Just when he was about to strike Galliard, the branch stiffened and attempted to go for his side. It was the same change as before. No, actually, just considering the change, it was different. It had been as hard as a club before, and now, it was as quick as lightning. Yeon-woo twisted his body mid-air, barely avoiding the attack. Or he thought he avoided it. This time, the end of the branch shined and pierced his side. Pung! It was such a sudden shift. Even though he had been chasing it after his draconic eyes, he couldn't tell what had happened. Before Yeon-woo could bring his magic bayonet down, he was blown away by the impact to his stomach. Yeon-woo floated in the air and rolled to the ground. Kook, kook. Phlegm was stuck in his throat. He almost threw up. How is it? I'll do it again. Yeon-woo forced himself up. He had taken a hit again, but he saw something he hadn't seen before. Wouldn't he be able to avoid it this time? He wanted to see the magic of the branch. Galliard smiled faintly. Yeon-woo's eyes were burning up. His dejected state of mind had disappeared. It won't be different this time. It will be. If you insist on doing it until you understand, I have no reason to stop you. Galliard flicked the branch at Yeon-woo and provoked him. Yeon-woo moved with a different strategy this time. The result was the same. Pack. How? Yeon-woo continued to attack using different methods. He threatened Galliard with the 8 writings of divinations of the 8 extreme swords. However, Yeon-woo landed on the ground with a pack or a puck sound every time. His entire body was covered with grime. Just what happened? Yeon-woo looked blankly at Galliard. He didn't get a single counterattack in while attacking him. It wasn't a technical problem. Yeon-woo was definitely above Galliard in terms of skill. He was frustrated by the strange magic that continued to make him fall. He was able to see something, but that was it. He couldn't read more than that. Galliard didn't use any magic power or skills. The draconic eyes confirmed that Galliard didn't break his word. In the end. Ha! Yeon-woo sighed. It was a sign of surrender. If Shannon or Han Ryeong was around, he would ask for advice, but they were silent like always. Just how is this possible? Galliard smiled, not a single fleck of dirt on him. Consciousness. Consciousness. Yeon-woo was baffled. He knew about consciousness as well. He had even gained a numbering skill called extrasensory perception through it on the 5 mountains of penances. Tien, consciousness changed to consciousness for accuracy to show that it's not the normal consciousness that we think of in English. However, he didn't see Galliard use his consciousness. You said you focused on pushing your body to the limit, right? Yes, sir. That might be a good way to train. Considering the traits of a dragon body, the limits will be very high. It's definitely not easy to train yourself up to that point. Yeon-woo nodded his head. The wall that he crashed into this time was high, but the training he had done until now wasn't easy either. Pushing your body to the extreme made one as worn out as a used rag. But the problem comes after that. After that, it's about how you use that power. Yeon-woo shook his head in disagreement. I'm not trying to brag, but I don't think I lack anything in terms of ability. His ability continued to improve as he grew. Yeon-woo already mastered the 8 writings of divination and was also training his magic to the extreme as well. I think you're mistaken about something. What I'm talking about is different from ability. How should I explain this? Galliard stroked his chin and organized his thoughts. Imagination. You lack imagination. What kind of nonsense was this? Galliard laughed like he realized what he said didn't make sense and tried again. I'll show you slowly. It looked like he was just playing with the branch. Then, the space around Galliard began to shift. Yeon-woo's eyes widened. The change was so sudden that if Galliard didn't show him slowly, he would have missed it. He's demonstrating his consciousness with his body. The reason why Yeon-woo hadn't been able to see the consciousness was because Galliard wasn't letting it out, but rather circulating it inside himself. Yeon-woo had only thought of releasing his consciousness. The consciousness was something to enlarge just his mind. He only considered it a tool to make his sword sharper and firmer and to read the surroundings of an opponent that was far away. Something similar to extrasensory perception and aura. He had never thought of circulating it within his body. If he didn't pull it out, he didn't need to use it. The world of his mind would always stay inside of him even without effort. However, Galliard had flipped his way of thinking around. Galliard enlarged his mind and synchronized his mind with his physical body. He had pushed his consciousness into the deepest parts of his body. With this, the 2 bodies were completely under his control, and he could cause changes as he imagined them. Shik. Galliard slowly moved forward, swinging the branch. When he sped up, the branch was twisting the space around it. As he did, Galliard's body slightly changed. Yeon-woo saw the changes in Galliard's muscles, the manipulation of consciousness, and the movement of strength. Each squirmed as they connected to each other. And within that, there were many different things. Galliard was something different every moment. He became a strong storm or fast like lightning. He became a firm rock or bent softly like a palm tree. Yeon-woo realized his mistake then. He had only focused on how the branch changed when he should have read the change in Galliard. The branch only changed as an extension of Galliard. Consciousness, and its change. Countless consciousnesses combined to become Galliard. Yeon-woo felt like he knew what the imagination that Galliard had talked about was. Becoming storm and lightning. That was probably what he meant. The space around him changed, influenced by the consciousness. Tack. Galliard brought the branch down and sighed. Whew. My entire body aches after using it for the first time in a while. Crack, crack. Galliard stretched out his muscles and turned to Yeon-woo. Did you see something? I've never heard of moving your body with consciousness. Since most people release it or put it inside their weapons. Right. Yes, sir. They think of consciousness as a tool or weapon. But it's not. Galliard put emphasis on his words. Consciousness is a lubricant. Yeon-woo's eyes slightly became bigger. Consciousness is a supplement to make your existence stronger. A supplement of spreading your senses beyond yourself. A supplement to make your sword sturdier and sharper. A supplement to use the power of your physical body properly. Onov, L, by, N, com. Yeon-woo thought of what Galliard said in the beginning. How he was going to use his power. Yeon-woo was already powerful after training his body to the extreme. He also had skills to back up his physical prowess. However, he had never thought of how he was going to use it. Even if it was the same strength, it was vastly different depending on how it was used. Consciousness allowed him to control how it was used and made the process smoother. Using your body properly means that you are properly controlling your power. However, most people get this confused. They think that they can use their strength properly. But they're wrong. Galliard shook his head. You must be able to use your consciousness freely. You have to be able to use your body like a sword. Can you do that? Yeon-woo closed his mouth and thought. How had he fought until now? It was power. He only wanted more power. That was also why he forced himself to train. Power. This was the ultimate destructive force to Yeon-woo. The 8 extreme swords, wave of fire, and dragon killers. They were all to raise his destructive power. But that wasn't it. Galliard was telling him not to focus solely on power. Power was just power. He shouldn't be moved by it but move it himself instead. He had to control it. Consciousness was the most important thing for that. Yeon-woo felt the world that he had been living in crumbling. It was like there was a hole in it. It was just a small one, but there was a hole in the wall. It was so small that it wasn't even noticeable, but he could barely see what was behind it. The wall I was feeling wasn't a limit but the world that I trapped myself in. Why didn't I think that I misunderstood what I had gained until now? He felt his frustration slowly fading away. However, he felt like it wasn't going to be easy, and he didn't know where to start. Consciousness. He needed to research how to use consciousness and how this was supposed to be applied to his body. He was grateful. Now that he knew the path, he only had to find it. Even though the hole in the wall was small, it could become a crack that would bring the whole thing down. Yeon-woo bowed to Galliard. There was something Jeong-woo said about you. Galliard's eyes were filled with curiosity. He wanted to know what the person he missed said about him. He said that you were his first teacher. Galliard rubbed his face with an awkward face. His nose was a bit red. He had repeatedly told Jeong-woo not to say things like that, but it seemed like he had still been saying cringy things like that. Now I know why he said that. Don't say useless things. Galliard shook his hand in embarrassment. From now on, using your consciousness actively is the most important part. I suppose it'll just sound like nonsense if I tell you to use it. Yes, sir. You have to think of controlling your body, not your consciousness. As I said, consciousness is only a lubricant, so if you're on the right path, it'll come with it. Controlling my body. Yeon-woo repeated the same words over and over again. Also, there's probably no better way to control your body than Ba Xing Kyung. Yeon-woo's eyes shined. Ba Xing Kyung. It was an acronym for Ba-bup, Shin-bup, and Kyung-gong. Bu-bup was the method of rolling your feet, Shin-bup was moving your body, and Kyung-gong was making your body lighter. Moving your body. This is the foundation of all martial arts. That's why this is the very basic method of controlling your body. Something important to using Ba Xing Kyung is Shunpo. Galliard nodded his head. Yeon-woo's eyes flashed. He felt like he had snuck a look at the secret of Shunpo, the skill that could unlock Alforoni's third skill. The path was finally opened. Chapter 255 Growth, 5. Galliard glanced at the sky. The sun had set, and the moon was rising. A yellow light flashed in his eyes and disappeared. The night was home to dark elves. Others might think it was cold, but to them, it was like being in your mother's warm hug. Galliard felt himself becoming more powerful. The moon was brighter than normal, so it was the perfect moment to show something. Actually, even if it was dark, they wouldn't be hindered, but Galliard felt like the moon was also cheering Yeon-woo on. You said Jeong-woo told you I was his first teacher, right? Yes, sir. And the second is probably Brahm. Then who's the third? Yeon-woo just faintly smiled. Galliard pshed. I see. He's not someone you can easily talk about. Galliard shook his head and looked at Yeon-woo. You know, that was hard for me. And it was scary as well. Being someone's teacher, it's like what the martial king is to you. To Jeong-woo, you were someone like that. That's why it was hard. But he still thought of me like that, gosh. Galliard looked like he was reminiscing about the old days. In there, Cha Jeong-woo was laughing. He was always playful and bright. That face overlapped with Yeon-woo. Their expressions and impressions were different, but they felt the same. Since it already turned out like this, since I'm already a teacher, how about I do what I did for your younger brother? Sounds good. I'll leave it to you. Yeon-woo bowed. Galliard nodded and stepped back. He had a relaxed attitude like he had come from a walk. But the aura that came from him couldn't be compared to before. Walk. Yeon-woo's thoughts about Galliard instantly changed. He thought that there wasn't anything that different about him since the tutorial, but that wasn't it. Galliard was different. It wasn't that his physical abilities were different. The energy concentration. The concentration of magic power and the threatening atmosphere he gave off were different. It meant that he had gained some newfound powers during this time. Just what made him change this much? Galliard spoke to Yeon-woo with deep eyes. Since you mastered Shunpo to some extent, you should know the basics. But there are things that a lot of people have mistaken about Shunpo. Shun, they just think that it means fast. But... Pat. Galliard quickly dashed forward. An intense wind wrapped around Yeon-woo and disappeared. The grass shook and leaves fluttered up. It's not just fast. Wish. Galliard appeared in front of Yeon-woo. Then, he floated up to the sky from the breeze that happened to pass by. He lightly stood on a branch like a feather. It can be light like this. Galliard jumped down from the branch and landed on the ground. Kong. The ground shook around him. It was like someone threw a large rock. Or heavy. Spat. From there, Galliard took a step forward. As he did, other Galliards started to appear. 8 shadows moved around Yeon-woo. Or Shoei. This time, the shadows all disappeared one by one. When the last one disappeared, Galliard's presence couldn't be felt from anywhere. Nothingness. His existence was erased. Yeon-woo whipped his head around looking for Galliard, who couldn't even be found with the draconic eyes. And quiet. Only Galliard's voice rang out in the air. Then, tens of lightning bolts landed on top of Yeon-woo's head like an explosion. Yeon-woo jumped back in surprise. Kwang. Galliard reappeared with a grin like he didn't know anything. And loud. Shunpo is a friend with many faces. Yeon-woo blankly nodded his head. He realized that he had been using Shunpo wrong all this time. All this time, Yeon-woo had been focused only on speed. Destructive power and speed. These were prioritized over everything else, and he had benefited from this. But now, he realized how closed his mind had been to think that he could climb higher with just speed. The Shunpo that Galliard used was Galliard himself. It was fast, light, heavy, fancy, quiet, and loud. That was Galliard. His consciousness could be felt from it. And from now on, you'll be facing this friend. It's a friend who changes his mind a lot, so even if it's hard, take good care of it. Yeon-woo heavily nodded his head. Before we meet our friend, we need to get ready. First, before we start, let me ask you this. Which section of your body is most necessary for movement? Isn't it the lower body? Right. The lower body is the center of your body. Galliard nodded his head. The lower body had to be firm for the body to be healthy. Power could only be used when the lower body was sturdy. The lower body was the foundation of all martial arts. Then we should take care of the lower body first. Galliard grinned. For some reason, Yeon-woo felt like he was filled with mischief. First, squat walk around the village 1,000 times. ******. From that day, Yeon-woo's brutal training began. But everything was ridiculous. Squat walking, leapfrogging, running without rest. They were all things he couldn't see the point of. The one-horned tribe couldn't see what the goal of his training was because they were all things they finished when they were little children. I heard Kane started something again. Yet. It was some kind of weird jump. He looked like a frog, hee. What's he doing? Beats me. If the snake hunter ordered him to do it, there must be a reason. I wonder what it is. I don't know what it is, but Kane was dying. The tribe members began to guess why Yeon-woo was training. No one looked down on him. Rather, there were more people who were intensely watching Yeon-woo's training. Even though they giggled when Yeon-woo walked by in squats, no one thought it was ridiculous. Galliard was pretty famous within the tribe and everyone acknowledged him. It was more accurate to say that they were interested in him. Even in the tower, dark elves were rare. It was even rarer to find someone with a hunter nickname. The one-horned tribe considered them skilled warriors. Visit No. V. Elb. I. N for the best novel reading experience. Instruction from the hunter would include methods of how he trained himself. The one-horned tribe drooled looking at the training because they went crazy for anything that was related to martial arts. It was a shame they didn't know what it was for. The same went for Fanti and Edora. What is that? Edora looked at Yeon-woo with a blank face. She had taken a break from mastering her yang sword to see how Yeon-woo was doing, but Yeon-woo was really jumping around everywhere like a frog. To be exact, Yeon-woo was jumping to catch a stone that Galliard was tossing in the air. The problem was that the stone was thrown in any which direction, so Yeon-woo just followed after it. He jumped up into the sky, crash-landed on the ground, and fell in the pond. He was in a horrible state. He was happy after catching the stone, and after he failed, his shoulders would droop. He's cute. Yeon-woo looked like a puppy to Edora's blind eyes. On the other hand, Fanti observed Yeon-woo with a stiff face. His eyes were hardened. Veins popped out of his clenched fists. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Above. Pat. Yeon-woo tossed the stone he had into the ground and flew up into the sky. They were in opposite directions, but he quickly turned his body mid-air and grabbed the stone before it landed on the ground. He looked like an acrobat. He was extremely careful in catching the stone. Actually, though it looked like a stone, it was actually a cluster of dirt. The cluster of dirt would have fallen apart from the velocity at which it was tossed, but while Yeon-woo twisted his body in the air, the quality of the dirt turned to one of a light spring breeze. It was consciousness. He was still lacking, but every time he moved, consciousness flowed out of his movements. Actually, it wasn't that hard to use consciousness. The most important thing was to focus. Yeon-woo had an impressive concentration already, so he was able to get the gist of it. Of course, that didn't mean it was easy. Focusing your consciousness on your sword was actually on the easier side. A sword was firm. It was easy to set your consciousness on something that had a sturdy form. It wouldn't break apart no matter how hard you tossed it around, so it was easy to maintain as well. However, his body was different. Even though he projected his consciousness, his body changed frequently. The pulsing muscles, the movements in between tissue, the blood flowing in the veins, and the involuntary movements of the organs, the body was made up of too many complex things, so it was never in a fixed position. Even if he projected his consciousness on it, it was easy for it to crumble apart. Also, Shunpo had caused more of these changes, so it was impossible to pour his consciousness into every footstep and fist as he moved. He wanted to know how Galliard had done it. He had asked about it, but Galliard just laughed awkwardly and answered like the following. An obsession beyond your consciousness. That'll do the trick. Obsession. It meant that he had to put all his consciousness on his body. It was easier said than done. Galliard pushed Yeon-woo even harder. He explained that if Yeon-woo moved his body without rest, there would be a moment when his separated mind and body would match up. Like Galliard intended, Yeon-woo was able to feel that a unique part of his body was pulsing, albeit only for a moment. No, to be precise, it became familiar to him. In his subconscious, the changes in his body had become normal. Cognizance had occurred. Yeon-woo exclaimed to himself. Cognizance. Why didn't he think of that before? Cognizance was the very basis of Muzhong. It was something that examined the changes in his body so he could move more smoothly. If this continued, he could naturally mediate and experience mental growth as well. That meant it was a way he could examine his body and mind. The important thing was that it fit perfectly with Galliard's explanation on how to control his consciousness with his body. To Yeon-woo, this was easier than anything else. Extrasensory perception. The way he projected his consciousness to read the change of the world was through cognizance. Yeon-woo was able to establish his ego on the 20th floor, and he was able to use this against the demonism in the world of his subconscious. It was the internalization of his extrasensory perception. He could observe his body and pour consciousness into where it was needed. He began to control his body. You have learned a new way to use consciousness. Consciousness is a path that holy power travels through. Find new ways to use it after more practice. The stronger your consciousness, the freer your holy level. The proficiency of extrasensory perception has increased 40.5%. Your understanding of your body has dramatically increased. You have learned about the concept of synchronizing your consciousness and body. Your proficiency of Shunpo has dramatically increased 82.9%. After he found a solution, the rest of his training went smoothly. He would still need some time to get used to it, but practice was one of the easiest things for Yeon-woo. Pushing himself to the limits, as he had in Africa, was the secret to Yeon-woo's survival. Time difference. In the slowed-down world, Yeon-woo combined his body and extrasensory perception together to move with consciousness. Here, he would practice endlessly. Tack. Yeon-woo lightly landed on the ground. It was slightly crushed, but the cluster of dirt was still bound together in his hand. Chapter 256 Growth, 6. I've still got a long way to go. Yeon-woo mumbled to himself looking at the cluster of dirt in his hand. He had managed to preserve its shape this time, but he wasn't satisfied. If only he could use his consciousness to control his strength. But, now my consciousness follows after me naturally. Yeon-woo grinned, feeling proud and disappointed at the same time. Moving his body for the first time after pushing his lower body to the extreme, he could definitely feel that he was different. It was especially noticeable when he jumped into the air as his consciousness naturally stuck onto him to create many different changes. It was evidence that his body was fundamentally different now. Yeon-woo's muscles had been hard as rocks because he had continuously trained all this time. But now, they were smooth, like rubber. The Philosopher's Stone and the magic circuit provided him with a great amount of magic power. His extrasensory perception was clearer than normal, and Yeon-woo was able to feel the pulse of every cell and muscle. However, Yeon-woo still thought he needed to train more. Even though he had succeeded in internalizing his consciousness, he hadn't synchronized it with his body. He needed to completely control consciousness like he used aura. Looks like you got the basics down now. Just then, Galliard landed next to Yeon-woo with a satisfied smile. Yeon-woo laughed in disbelief. The system was telling him that the proficiency of his skill was 80%, but Galliard was now saying that he was just beginning to take baby steps. It meant he still had a lot to learn. Since you somewhat know how to walk, let's learn to run. Yeon-woo remembered the different movements Galliard had used when he attacked the Elohim on the 23rd floor. They were all different applications of Shunpo. His enemies weren't able to fight back when he used each one. Galliard was as sneaky as a ghost. Yeon-woo hadn't been able to see what Galliard was trying to do, so he wasn't able to interfere that much either. What Galliard did at that time was amplify his consciousness. Yeon-woo's eyes flashed. This was the real start of learning how to use consciousness. Even so, He had another thought. If these were the ways of walking, what would flying be? What should I do? Yeon-woo asked eagerly. Simple. It all depends on how well you know the basics. Galliard lifted a corner of his mouth. Actually trying it out is the best. Pang. Galliard attempted to stab Yeon-woo with the branch in his hand. He had gathered so much consciousness in it that the sound of air condensing and exploding rang out. Yeon-woo instinctively moved back. The branch barely missed his temple. Twisting his body, he pulled out his magic bayonet. Kwang! As the branch and the magic bayonet crossed, something exploded. The two shadows moved back and met in the air again. Kong! Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Fanti was deep in thought. I want you to become my wings. He had been happy when he heard that. Become stronger. And he felt like someone was pressing his chest when he heard that. Become strong enough until we can't be crushed, regardless of who pushes you down. When he heard the last words, Fanti cursed. Damn it! It wasn't a curse against Yeon-woo. He was cursing himself. When Yeon-woo first told him to get stronger, Fanti confidently said that he would become Yeon-woo's teeth, not his wings. However, he just said this not to have his mind read. This whole time, Fanti's thoughts were jumbled. He could feel the gap between Yeon-woo and himself becoming greater as time went on, so he was worried that he might completely fall behind. He continued to train his Muzhong, but he didn't get far. He wasn't able to escape from the thought that he was falling behind. He was too weak. On one hand, he didn't know why he couldn't focus and what was making him suffer so much. When he saw Yeon-woo leapfrogging around, Fanti had shut his mouth. He realized what the emotion that was making him suffer all this time was. Inferiority. To Fanti, Yeon-woo was a role model to respect. At first, he considered him a rival and followed him around to fight him, but Fanti began to see his human side and wanted to learn from him. Still, he continued to use his envy of Yeon-woo's abilities as a way to motivate himself. But back then, he had only thought that he would be able to catch up someday, he hadn't had any other thoughts. Now, he felt like he knew. Why can't I even go near him? Fanti felt inferiority and respect towards Yeon-woo at the same time. Why could that guy do it, but he couldn't? He also worked that hard. But why? From his younger days, Fanti was only satisfied when he was in charge. When he played war games with his friends, he always had to be the commander, and he always had to exceed others when there was group training. It was unthinkable that someone could be in front of him. The throne. Fanti only wanted one thing when he was younger, and he lived believing that he could never fall behind in order to become king. He enjoyed having others be envious of him, but he had never thought of looking at others the same way. He just scoffed when people said he was arrogant. Then, he met Yeon-woo. In their fight, Fanti felt his world crashing down on him. He made a mistake thinking that he was the center of the world. There were countless people in front of him. Still, he worked hard to catch up, and he found himself observing Yeon-woo with respect. He placed Yeon-woo in a position that he never would have when he was younger. But he never caught up to Yeon-woo, he only became more distant. Then as time went on, Fanti began to understand. He would sigh saying, "Woo, there he goes again," and thought that there was nothing he could do to catch up. He had given up at some point. That was clearly where things went wrong. Yeon-woo was still a symbol of respect to Fanti. He was proud of Yeon-woo for walking that hard path alone, but it wasn't something that he should have given up on. This isn't it. Something lifted Fanti's head. It was his desire to win. The emotions that he had thrown away after understanding that he couldn't catch up. Fanti ground his teeth. He pressed the inferiority down. Instead, the passion for winning flared up. He wanted to defeat Yeon-woo. Appa! I'm going to climb the tower. Edora, who had been silently watching Yeon-woo next to him, suddenly spoke. Fanti woke up from his thoughts and turned to his little sister. What was Eudora thinking as she looked at Yeon-woo? It was clear that she had a change of heart like him. Her eyes with insight open were deep. For a moment, Fanti thought he was looking at his mother, the psychic medium. One thing he knew for sure was that he wasn't thinking the same thing as her. Fanti was feeling a desire to win, and Eudora's newfound mind probably stemmed from love. However, Fanti didn't ask what she was thinking. Like he had his own thoughts, she could cherish her own. All he could do was silently cheer her on as her brother. That was why he nodded his head without saying much, and Eudora turned around, saying, "Thanks." Rung, dung. The divine magic sword in Eudora's arm cried out. He could feel a heat coming from it. A while after Eudora left, Fanti silently watched Yeon-woo and Galliard, then whipped his body around and headed somewhere. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. The head elder pushed up his glasses and frowned. What? Your blood lightning, please give it to me. He was speaking confidently like he had come to take back something he left at a pawn shop. The head elder started at Fanti and put down the book he was reading. He thought he would be able to rest because the martial king was quiet, but his son was saying nonsense now. He wanted to slap the face that was similar to the martial king's, but he controlled himself and asked Fanti a question with his eyes squinted. Are you saying that you know what the blood lightning is? I do. Fanti nodded. Blood lightning. The symbol of the blood light philosopher. It was a martial weapon that came from the divination of the Cheongram family, the lightning control. Fanti's feelings of competitiveness towards Yeon-woo had turned into a desire to become stronger. This was the result of Fanti's thinking. However, the head elder snorted like there was no way he would give it away. No. You don't know. No. I do know. No. You don't know. Fanti was about to say something again but just closed his mouth. The head elder smiled. He was looking down on Fanti. It was a mocking smile. Should I tell you the truth? Fanti nodded his head. You're weak. Fanti's eyes widened. His back stiffened. He clenched his fists. The head elder continued to mock him. Don't think of denying it. I'm right, aren't I? Your brothers? Yet. Most of them are weaker than you. But there are also those who are stronger than you. Don't forget that your mother and sister played a large part in you being a likely candidate for the throne. Even though you're famed for being the Cheongram siblings, there are a lot of monsters in the world. The village itself is full of warriors stronger than you, and there are many more others in the tower. Fanti clenched his teeth. However, the head elder didn't stop there. And one more thing. You're not even smart. Fanti's red eyes shook. It was what people said about him often, that he was simple and aggressive. However, that was only when people judged him nicely. In other words, it meant that he was stupid and he didn't think things through. The head elder was silently working hard in his office, but there actually wasn't anyone as arrogant as him. Even the martial king had to bend to him. Also, the head elder was someone who could afford to act like that. I'm strong. Smart? He's dead and not here anyone, but even the Black Dawn of the Devil Amy couldn't say anything to me. Who do you think cleaned up this archive? Who helped your father get to where he is now? Read lat.st chapters at nov.lbin.com only. The head elder definitely wasn't emanating any particular aura, but Fanti felt like he was being stepped on. He felt like someone was gripping his heart. It was getting harder to breathe. His heart almost beat out of his chest, and his clothes were drained with sweat. The bloodlight philosopher. Although overshadowed by the martial king, he was still a pillar of the tribe. Also, he had shown that he still had it to the world. Even Waltz had to bend to him. Fanti grit his teeth and spit out his words. You, sir. That's right. The head elder arrogantly nodded his head and continued. And the blood lightning symbolizes me. It's something I earned from fighting my entire life, tumbling, thinking, learning, losing, then fighting again, attempting, waiting, and waiting. Blood lightning is me. The head elder began to frown. His crumpled face expressed his rage. And what? The rage of a beast shook the atmosphere around it. Fanti couldn't tell if the atmosphere was shaking or if he was shaking. A guy who's not strong or smart wants something of mine. Return. It was a strict order. It was also a warning not to covet something that wasn't his when he didn't deserve it. Phaeton's shoulders trembled. He felt like he was falling down a cliff, like when he had first met Yeon-woo. His world was crumbling again. The last of his pride was destroyed. He glared at the head elder with red eyes. Normally, he would have thrown a tantrum and kicked the door to leave, but Fanti bowed his head. Please give me a chance. Chapter 257 Growth, 7. The head elder widened his eyes in surprise. The arrogant, self-absorbed prince had bowed his head. Did this child know what that meant? What had made him this desperate? Actually, the head elder judged Fanti highly, despite what he had said. He said that Fanti was simple, but it only looked that way because Fanti was direct and honest. In fact, Fanti's ability to differentiate and judge things was outstanding. Also, if he wasn't qualified, he wouldn't have been chosen to be the successor of the throne. The same went with what he said about being weak. The head elder and the martial king were geniuses, so it wasn't fair to compare Fanti to them. Fanti was actually one of the most skilled. There was almost no one around his age who achieved the level of the martial arts he had. There was just one reason why he was mocking him. It was to test his patience. Patience was the most important part of Muzhong. When your growth stopped, when you hit a wall, and when you lost in a battle, you had to be able to look back at and reflect on your actions. If you threw a tantrum and ran away because it was too hard, you could never grow. This was especially the case for a skill like blood lightning. The skill involved many difficult concepts because it was a Muzhong that the head elder himself had made, and deep self-restraint was needed to learn it. You would only be a book with a nice cover if you didn't have patience. The problem was that the Fanti that the head elder had observed until now was too impulsive. It was unacceptable to the composed head elder. However, he's changed. The head elder examined Fanti with flashing eyes. The normal Fanti probably would have kicked the door open to leave or lay down on the ground to throw a tantrum, but he was still standing with his head bowed. The head elder was silent for a long time. He wanted to check if Fanti was just playing games or if he had really changed. In that long silence, Fanti didn't move. That was how desperately he needed the blood lightning. It wasn't just because of his inferiority and desire to defeat Yeon-woo. He still respected him, and Fanti had been genuine when he said he would become Yeon-woo's teeth. Fanti and Yeon-woo couldn't be split apart anymore. And with all these emotions, there was one conclusion Fanti came to. Strength. He grit his teeth. I need strength. Like what Yeon-woo said about becoming stronger, Fanti knew that he would be nothing if he kept going like this. Eudora agreed with him. However, unlike Eudora, who would gain strength through climbing the floors, Fanti needed a more substantial and destructive strength. He couldn't forget the blood lightning he saw the head elder use on the battlefield. The influence the threat of blood lightning gave was something he wanted. This was why he wasn't going to move no matter what the head elder said. Pride? Arrogance? Were those things important? They were something only people with strength could have. Some time passed. Ha! The head elder sighed, shaking his head. Fanti realized that he had received a chance. However, he felt like it wasn't going to be easy, knowing the head elder's personality. And of course. Fine. If you're this stubborn, there's nothing I can do. However, you have to prove yourself. Fanti lifted his head. His back hurt from bending over for a long time, but his eyes were sparkling. What should I prove? Your qualification. The head elder's gaze was sunken beyond his glasses. I'm talking about your qualification to become my successor. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Qualification. Fanti was deep in thought as he left the head elder's residence. Proving his qualification to become the head elder's successor. He didn't understand what that meant. It probably wasn't something the head elder just said to make Fanti leave. The head elder wanted to see a reason to give Fanti the blood lightning. A reason to become his successor. Fanti looked down at his open hands. The head elder was the oldest person in the tribe, but he was also Fanti's great-great-uncle. He was the man who raised the martial king Neu to where he was and led the Cheongram family to prosperity. The motif of blood lightning control, was something Fanti enjoyed using. That meant he had the most basic qualification. It would be easier to learn blood lightning on top of what he already knew. Then that meant? Pause. Fanti stopped in his tracks. Shouldn't I get the lightning soul first? Lightning soul. It was what you earned after mastering lightning control. Your lightning and body became one, and you could open the path to strong energy. Blood lightning was a strong energy mujang. Of course lightning soul was the next most basic condition. Fanti felt like his mind became clearer. The path that he found after its many twists and turns was the same. Individual training. Lightning soul was the final result of what users of lightning control could gain. Unlike before, when he didn't know what to do, he now had a clear goal. Fanti headed out. There was no time to waste. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Ha! Ha! Are you saying Fanti is doing closed training? Yeon-woo panted as he looked at Galliard. What Galliard said as he practiced arrow shadow leap, a skill that rapidly sped one up, piqued his interest. Yet, I heard he went to the Martial King and insisted for the key to the Myeonbyeok building. Haha! The Myeonbyeok building. Seems like Fanti is really determined this time. Yeon-woo's eyes became bigger. The Myeonbyeok building was in the deepest parts of the closed training buildings. In there, you had to spend time alone with only a limited amount of food in a 5 Pyong area. It was impossible to open the door from the inside, so it wasn't something one easily attempted unless one was very patient. Only people who wanted to train for several years entered it. Fanti definitely hadn't gone in there half-heartedly. Also, with the authority of the royal family, he requested to open the martial archives. The elders convened that he was allowed to take 5 different books in with him from the gold archive. It'll probably be hard to see him for the time being. The gold archive was something that only the king or the elders could allow the entrance of. However, members of the royal family could enter at least once in their life freely. It seemed like Fanti had used this authority. Like what Galliard said, Fanti was definitely determined this time. What kind of expression had he made as he went into the Myeonbyeok building? Yeon-woo was curious, but he wasn't planning on visiting him. It was too cringy for each other. Also, there wasn't any need to do that. Yeon-woo felt like he knew how Fanti felt. The reality of things being easier said than done had probably motivated him. And he took 5 books with him, he'll have to work hard with that temper of his. It's easier for people who have had experience studying to study. Galliard smirked as he replied to Yeon-woo. Also, they say Edora began to climb the tower. She left quietly with only a note to the psychic medium, so it seems like she's also pretty determined too. Yeon-woo nodded his head. He understood their different decisions. Edora had insight and the Yang sword. It was best for her to raise her insight while using the Yang sword in actual battle. Edora will do well. He was a bit worried about Fanti, but his trust in Edora ran very deep. She hadn't shown him much, but he knew that she had many things she kept hidden. If she properly used her divine magic sword, it might be hard for him to win against her. Yeon-woo lightly shook the dust off his body and got ready again. If the 2 siblings were that determined, he couldn't fall behind. Losing to them will be an embarrassment as the eldest. With those thoughts, Yeon-woo kicked off from the ground again. Kwang! Swag! As soon as Yeon-woo moved, time flowed quickly again. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. You have learned about the way to control consciousness. You have learned Arrow Shadow Leap. Your proficiency in the skill Shunpo has increased dramatically 89.1%. And like that, you have earned a large hint about circulating consciousness. You have learned single river crossing. Your proficiency in the skill Shunpo has increased dramatically 95.2%. Training continued. You have learned how to use consciousness subconsciously. You have learned tension teleportation. Your proficiency in the skill Shunpo has increased 99.6%. And the time came to bear the fruit of his training. You have completely assimilated consciousness into your body. Extrasensory perception and your body are being synchronized. You have learned body transpose. Your proficiency in the skill Shunpo has dramatically increased 121.6%. Congratulations! The proficiency of the skill Shunpo has reached the max. You have gained a method of Bobyub. All stats related to the skill will increase. Additional stats are being given. Strength has increased by 15. Dexterity has increased by 19. You have gained a new understanding related to your skill. A superior skill is being opened. The skill slide has been created. Your proficiency of the skill slide has dramatically increased and succeeded in reaching the max. You have gained a method of Shinbube. A new skill is being searched for considering the player's stats. The superior skill light trace has opened. You have earned a method of Kyung-gong. The proficiency of the skill light trace dramatically. It is receiving the influence of your traits Demonic Dragon Body and Monk Nov, L, by, N, Com. A superior skill is opened. Wind Path. Numbering 80. Proficiency, 0.0%. Summary: the only friend of the Dark Elves, who had to live in the darkness away from the world, was the wind. The wind doesn't stay in one place and doesn't differentiate. Its flow is always free, and the Dark Elves desire to take after the wind. If you linger around the wind like the Dark Elves, you might find a path that you haven't been able to see before. Asterisk path finding. Every time you use the skill, different skill paths will be shown to you randomly. At the end of every path, there is a different result, and you can see from at least 2 to 5 of them. The higher your proficiency, the more paths you can see. You currently own 3 winds: Zephyr, Gust, North Wind. Asterisk Eye of the Storm. You can gather the wind around you and explode it. The storm can heavily damage your surroundings. The skill Draconic Eyes can be connected for clearer path finding. The number of paths you can see increase and their power is amplified. The skill Spirit of the Abyss can be connected, and the blessing of the Wind Spirit will follow. Walk. The changes came suddenly. He had been practicing controlling his consciousness and the body transpose. Suddenly, his draconic eyes burst open, and he could see 10 times more flaws than before. Yeon-woo felt his world spinning. In the slowed-down world of time difference, he got himself together, and he was able to see a whole new world. The flaws were flowing like rivers. It was only a slight difference, but they all had different colors from each other. Some were dark, and some were light. There were even some that were large and small, and they covered the entire world. All Yeon-woo had seen until now were flaws that were bound together like string. It was the first time he saw them flowing like this. Yeon-woo realized that this was the wind. The wind that he had felt only through his senses was something that he could now see through his eyes. That wasn't all. Like how he could see the wind, Yeon-woo could see his own body from another perspective. His senses were completely different. Yeon-woo felt more with his physical senses that were connected to consciousness, and he skillfully adjusted this. His heavy body felt light as a feather. He could feel the wind on his fingertips. Some parts were soft, and some were rough. Not only did he feel the wind, he could feel things beyond it. Also, Yeon-woo was able to control these all naturally. He spread his hand out. The wind naturally rolled into his hand in a round form. He blew consciousness into the form. HRSH. The form flared up with fire. Magic body, his body, consciousness, and flaws. Everything moved easily. Just a few hours ago, he could only connect them by focusing, but there was no need for that anymore. Congratulations! You've opened wind eyes. Just then, Galliard came down from above him. He patted Yeon-woo's shoulders. In our tribe, yet. You would be a hunter now. It must have been hard for you since you're not part of our tribe. You've done well. Yeon-woo shook his head. If it wasn't for you, I couldn't have even attempted it. It was the truth. He couldn't even imagine how long it would have taken without Galliard. His brother's first teacher had taught Yeon-woo so many things. He had generously passed the legacy of the Dark Elves down to him. Thanks to that, Yeon-woo was able to break down the wall that had been blocking him. You have earned the title Dark Elves Hunter. Yeon-woo was proud of himself as he read the message. Also, connecting Wind Path to Draconic Eyes and Spirit of the Abyss had been so easy. Because of them, considering the amplified effects it brought along with it, it wasn't just a numbering skill. This is almost an authority. It would probably be a mid-authority. Yeon-woo believed that this wind path would change him like the wave of fire had. How about trying it out? Yeon-woo nodded his head and stretched his hand out. The magic bayonet wrapped around his hand. He felt things that he never would have without wind eyes. It was hard to explain, but it was like he could feel the emotions of the magic bayonet. Like how he could see the wind with his draconic eyes, he could feel the magic bayonet with his senses. It was crying, saying to wake it up. It wanted to be released from loneliness. Yeon-woo blew consciousness inside of it to calm it down. His holiness followed after, and magic power flowed from him. The magic bayonet was finally able to release its vestige. In that moment, Yeon-woo felt like he became one with his sword. He was the magic bayonet, and the magic bayonet was him. Consciousness had completely synchronized them. It was the moment that his body became one his sword. Chingug! The magic bayonet cried out. Aura formed around it. It was sword strengthening. Yeon-woo lifted it powerfully to the right. With this, wouldn't he be able to replicate the Polgui that was imprinted in his head? Chapter 258 Growth, 8. Team, HH, Thursdays, Yahiko. Polgui, the power that the Martial King had completed after pushing his 8 extreme fists to the limit. Yeon-woo wanted to imitate the power in his sword strengthening. He gathered consciousness into the vestige of the magic bayonet. He acted out the movements he saw in his head. The source of this content Nov, L, by, N. Pat. Aura shined intensely, but nothing happened. SSSSS. Rather, the light at the end of the aura crumbled, like a sand castle being destroyed by a wave. It scattered smoothly. Yeon-woo muttered to himself looking at the quiet magic bayonet. As expected, it doesn't work. The Martial King had said something to him. It's because it's not your path. At the time, he didn't understand what the Martial King was talking about. He thought that something was wrong with the way he was doing things, so he tried to look for another way to do it, and even got Galliard's help to open Wind Path in the end. But the more he trained consciousness and controlled his body completely, Yeon-woo was able to realize what the Martial King meant. Polgui and the martial extremes weren't the path for me. Polgui and the martial extremes used consciousness energy as a foundation. It was a martial art made of the Martial King's thoughts and mind. It was a new Mujong that the Martial King created through his life experience and 8 extreme fists. Yeon-woo, who was on a completely different path from the Martial King, copy the Martial King's Polgui and martial extremes? Of course it would be impossible. It was different from how Fanti chased after the head elder's blood lightning. The Mujong that they used were similar, and Fanti was ready to throw everything he learned away to learn blood lightning. However, Yeon-woo wasn't like that. He had earned too many things until now. He didn't have the slightest inkling to throw all of them away to chase after Polgui and the martial extremes. The martial king never spoke about this either. Even if Yeon-woo decided to do this, the martial king would have rejected him. My ability with the sword stops here. The more he understood his body, the more Yeon-woo was able to judge his abilities. As Yeon-woo had always known, he wasn't talented. The only reason he had been able to grow this fast was that he grew the potential of the dragon body and made up for what he lacked in the slowed-down world of time difference. It was because he had worked as much as he needed to make up for. However, he had hit his limits. It wasn't the limit of reaching the third step awakening. This was really the line where Yeon-woo had to stop with his mental talent. No matter how hard he swung his sword around, he wouldn't grow anymore. It wasn't a wall that he was met with. It was a pathless cliff. Saying that this path wasn't for him meant that the sword wasn't his path. However, Yeon-woo realized that the martial king's words were also a hint. He was saying I should have put everything into the sword. To grow from now, I can't do a little bit of everything like I've done until now. I have to combine everything together. If there was a cliff in front of him, he had to grow wings. And what would those wings be? The answer was easy. Consciousness energy. Just like how the martial king had created the Polgui and martial extremes, Yeon-woo could make a martial art of his own. But, I don't know where to start. He had also wondered if he should enter the Myunbyeok building like Fanti and research the Yin sword and the Tai Chi Pangu sword. He might really see a new path that way. He might have even been able to re-establish the magic that he had learned until now. He had considered this for a while, but... no. I can just do that slowly. Yeon-woo shook his head. Going into the Myunbyeok building was really the last resort. He hadn't even gotten a good idea, and going in without a plan would just be a waste of time. Also, just because he had reached the limits of his sword and his body wouldn't grow from here, it didn't mean that there wasn't any solution. Even if things seemed impossible now, there was always a way. And it wasn't something he had to do right then and there. Wave of fire. I should complete that first. Since he completely knew how to control consciousness, completing Wave of Fire wouldn't be hard. Because it was a skill he failed to control every time, he needed to control it. There was also a final form of Wave of Fire that Yeon-woo needed. If this immense power is combined with aura, it'll be a sight to see. Yeon-woo could guarantee that there wouldn't be many people who could deal with his aura. Even the martial king had been surprised seeing what he could do against the Summer Queen. He wanted to test it out right away, but today, he needed to stop here and rest. His entire body was screaming at him to stop. Plop! Yeon-woo collapsed to the ground and sighed. Galliard smirked looking at Yeon-woo. Seems like it's not as easy as before. Yes, sir. This is probably what the martial king meant. I feel like all my strength is being sucked out just trying to attempt it. Don't feel too rushed. You're already growing fast. Rather, if it's too fast, it's easier for you to collapse. Yeon-woo nodded in understanding. Also, isn't it time to greet your visitors? It's not nice to leave them waiting. Yeon-woo nodded again. A few days ago, he received news that a visitor had come to see him. However, he had just sent a letter saying to wait because he was just on the verge of learning something about consciousness. Since he had grasped it now, it was probably now time to go see whoever it was. But before that, he needed to shower. Yeon-woo smelled the nasty odor emanating from his body, as he hadn't washed in several days, and sighed. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Whoa, this is pretty cool. I've never seen it before. Magicians really have strange heads on their necks. How were they able to think of this? How do I know what's going on in their heads? Keek keek. Hey, what about this? It looks good on me, It's like a pearl necklace on a pig. What, you bastard? The atmosphere in the village One-Horned tribe was bustling. They were excited because of items merchants brought from outside of the village. It had been a while since they had come. All of their eyes were sparkling as they fought to take what they wanted. Most merchants would have smiled widely, but Atron felt anxious. He was going to get neurosis at this rate. Whoa! How do you use this? It's so complicated. Where would you use this? Fool! Why are you using it like that? Then hit the top. If you hit complicated machines, they'll work again. Oh, I see. Puck, puck. They must have Uden noodles for brains. Why would you touch it like that? Atron's faces turned into all kinds of colors. Every time the One-Horned tribe members touched an expensive artifact, he felt like he was going to go crazy. It was a wonder they didn't break with how rough they were handling it. It was hard to stop them. The image of the warriors walking over the red dragon without feeling threatened by them was still clear in his head. The guy that had a stupid face saying he didn't know how to use the artifact was the one who bloodied the head of one of the 81 eyes. Atron still got nightmares remembering how he had cackled at the sky covered in blood. The one next to him was someone who cut off a leg of a 9-dragon son, and the other was the crazy bastard who chewed on it, saying that the meat tasted good. The female warrior behind them looked comparatively fine, but she was actually the craziest person here. She had built a hill of the corpses of the Red Dragon players, and she climbed on top of it, saying, "I built the highest tower." She was a crazy bee. It wasn't a secret that the warriors of the One-Horned tribe members had played games building towers of corpses because of her. They also placed bets on who broke the most heads and who would send blow people away the furthest. When he saw the one who beat up the Summer Queen grin at him, Atron's entire body trembled. "Hey? This is broken. Hey! It's exploding." Just then, an incident happened not too far away from where they were. Ack! Thankfully, before an explosion occurred, some other warrior came to stop it, so thankfully, no one was hurt. The man promised to pay him back, but Atron felt like he was going to faint. It had already been 4 days since he had been here. He didn't know why Yeon-woo wasn't coming. Muscles. 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 Everywhere he looked, all he could see were hunky muscles and the smell of sweat. If this went on, he would probably be locked in this prison of muscles. Or die from stress. Thanks for bringing these good items. It was nice to boost everyone's moods. The Martial King patted Atron's shoulders, not knowing how he was feeling. An image of the Martial King ripping the Summer Queen's wings out flashed by in his head. If the Martial King accidentally put too much pressure on his shoulders, what would happen to him? He almost wet his pants. "Tell Frisia I'll use it well." Atron came to attention at the Martial King's words. A name that shouldn't have been mentioned had come out. Frisia. He turned his head subconsciously, but the Martial King was leaving examining a glove in his hand. Of course someone like him would know that person. However, even the people who knew that person called her master, they never spoke her name. No, there wasn't anyone who knew her name. Atron only knew it by coincidence as well. He even received warnings to erase that memory from his brain from the people around him. But the Martial King said that name so easily, like he was telling Atron to deliver his greetings to an old friend. What was the relationship between the two? He was curious, but Atron couldn't muster the courage to go ask the Martial King. His merchant's instinct told him that if he asked, things were going to get complicated. He knew that a curiosity he couldn't handle would make his lifespan shorter. He was standing there looking blankly at the Martial King's back when he saw a familiar face. No, to be exact, it was a familiar mask. It was a mask that was as dark as a demon. It was a demon-like bastard to Atron. He didn't want to see it again, but what could he do? Atron was someone who would jump into fire for money. "The thing I asked for." Yeon-woo got straight to the point without saying hello. Atran was about to spew out all the curses he had been keeping inside of him all this time, but he just held it in, nodding his head. They accepted it. Yeon-woo nodded his head. Okay. Let's head somewhere else. Chapter 259 Growth, 9. Team, HH, Thursdays, Yahiko, 1/12. I'm telling you this ahead of time, but you never asked for anything other than setting up a meeting. So don't complain to me if the meeting doesn't go well. Atran drew the line first. The meeting with by the table was difficult to set, and it took a long time for him to hear an answer. He had thought he failed, but he suddenly received a positive response. Atran was pretty surprised. By the table was a group surrounded by secrecy from the world. They should have rejected the request of a player who wasn't even a ranker, but they had accepted it. Atran knew that this was also a chance for him. It was a great honor and opportunity to contact by the table as an ordinary merchant. Rumors would spread, and the name of the merchant who had connected them would be known by more people. However, he was worried about what Yeon-woo would do if things didn't go well. Atran was scared of Yeon-woo ever since he saw how the red dragon was crushed. Yeon-woo just waved his hand as if telling Atran to get on with it. Atran held in the sigh trying to escape his lips and pulled out a crystal from a subspace. Walk. After he quietly took a few steps back, the crystal shattered, and a blue light was emitted. It was an artifact that stated the other side's meaning that only a single meeting was enough. It scattered in a whirlpool. The scene around the two changed. They were in a forest. It felt like there was really a fresh breeze coming their way within this illusion. Atran blankly looked around. On the other hand, Yeon-woo was calm. He was pretty used to it now. An imaginary world. It was similar to the imaginary world that Brahm had used in the Demon's Forest. But still, creating a barrier like this with just a single crystal was incredible. All kinds of animals gathered around the rock Yeon-woo was sitting on. Different varieties of birds flew above him, and there were foxes and deer on the ground. They weren't normal animals. They either had a magical aura coming from them or were a large size. The imaginary world was filled with beings that were hard to find even on the 11th floor stage. The trees split as the ground shook, and gigantic shadows appeared. A large wolf that looked to be bigger than 5 meters at a single glance was examining Yeon-woo from between the trees. It was a legendary beast with white fur, a white wolf. There was a girl sitting crisscross on its head. Thump. Wow! It's so pretty. A white wolf. I haven't seen one in a while. Nike and Nemesis, who had been sleeping inside the Philosopher's Stone, woke up to mutter to themselves. The white wolf was as formidable as the 4 legendary beasts. It was similar to Anastasia's Gumiho, which Yeon-woo saw in the entertainment district. The white world laughed in a low tone like it read Nike and Nemesis's thoughts. The girl stroked the white wolf's head. She had reddish-brown shoulder-length hair. However, she was wearing a wooden mask, so it was hard to see her face. Her deep eyes were striking. Atran gasped subconsciously when he saw this. He thought a weed or a wild flower would come, but the one who came was someone who was incomparable to those beings. Phrygia. The master of by the table herself had arrived. Phrygia turned her head their way. Even though her face was covered by a wooden mask, her intense eyes were clearly regarding Atran. She didn't say anything, but Atran could tell what she meant. Don't say anything. Atran nodded his head with his mouth shut. He calmed his thumping heart down. It seemed like Phrygia didn't want Yeon-woo to know her identity. Atran was curious why the master had come herself. She didn't like going outside. She was surrounded by more secrecy than by the table. Atran quietly watched the two. His thumping heart didn't calm down. Just when he thought he was fine, Yeon-woo made his heart skip a beat again. I didn't know the master of by the table herself would come. Atran's body stiffened. He didn't think that Yeon-woo would recognize Phrygia. Phrygia was silent for a moment as well. She narrowed her eyes at Yeon-woo. Even though she was definitely a hologram, Yeon-woo felt like she was digging into him. It was a gaze that was similar to that of the martial king and the psychic medium. It was the gaze that differentiated between foes and friends. Then, Frisia jumped down from the white wolf's head and landed on the ground. She didn't make any sound because of the soft grass. Step back for a while. Coo. The white wolf rubbed his head in Frisia's arms and slowly stepped back. He continued to look where they were from where he was with a stiff face, thinking that Yeon-woo would try to injure his owner. Nice to meet you. You wanted to meet us. Frisia opened her mouth with a polite bow. She was probably curious how Yeon-woo knew about her, but she didn't say anything, like all she had to do was fulfill her goal for coming here. She's saying that she can figure out how I know whenever she wants. That's the master, I see. It's hard to read her mind. Yeon-woo had a mask on like Frisia did, so it was hard to read his expression as well. Most exchanges with by the table were done anonymously. When they had to meet, they kept their identities hidden with masks. Only their leader, Frisia, knew the identities of the members. Obviously, Frisia's identity was a secret as well. All that was known about her was that she almost never left the imaginary world and that she cherished magical animals. Even the name Frisia might have been fake. She knew that everyone was curious about her but never revealed herself. I only found out who she was later, but she was someone who was hard to talk to ever since I met her. She always replied coldly to any jokes I made. What should I do to melt this ice, Princess Ajima? Tien, Ajima means middle-aged woman. Jeong-woo first came to know by the table when he was preparing to challenge the 50th floor. By the table showed an interest in sponsoring Arthea. His brother had accepted this readily. There were a lot of cases when unions sponsored famous clans to spread their name and took a part of the subjugation rewards. Arthea had already been sponsored by several unions at that point, so he thought that by the table was just an ordinary union like the rest of them. However, the moment that their sponsorship funds rose to an amount that most unions couldn't even dream of, he realized that by the table wasn't normal. That was actually when Arthea really began to spread its wings. With the funds from by the table, they were able to buy artifacts they couldn't before and restructure their finances. Then, he learned that the person who had come to offer their sponsorship was their leader. The members had been curious then. Why were they supporting them? Some unions requested as much as they sponsored, so there was occasionally a fight. However, by the table didn't do anything like that. They didn't have any requests, as if they just wanted Arthea to focus on climbing the floors. Until Arthea collapsed. Even when only a shadow of the old Arthea was left, by the table had been there. They ended their sponsorship when his brother had been preparing to fight to his last battle. In a way, they had left when he needed them the most, but his brother was still grateful to them. They had stayed until the end when his lover and comrades had left. I couldn't discover the goal of by the table even until the end. However, I was sure that there was a common occurrence whenever Frisia appeared. King. She appeared when she determined that there was a ruler of the tower or someone who could occupy that position. Only those who were at the level of the 9 kings knew Frisia. There was only one reason why Frisia had shown up here. Like Jeong-woo, she judged me highly. Yeon-woo thought that even if he hadn't approached them first, by the table would have contacted him someday. However, that was probably going to be when he was near the 50th floor like Arthea. That was fine if he was planning on solo playing until then, but since he decided to create a clan, he desperately needed their help. Also, it was because he was grateful to see the person who had saved his brother's life. Anyways, in the end, the reason why Yeon-woo had summoned by the table here was simple. Sponsorship. Yes. Can I ask why? I'm planning on establishing a clan. I heard rumors that by the table sponsors a few clans. Are you saying you want your new clan to be a part of that? If possible. Do you know how we decide who to sponsor? I heard you look for them yourselves. That's correct. There are some people who contact us like this. For most of them, you reject them. Frisia nodded. Then you must know our answer. Is that so? I suppose nothing can be done. Thank you for meeting with me. Yeon-woo nonchalantly nodded his head like he expected this and slowly stood up. Frisia's eyes crinkled at his sudden actions. What are you doing? This time, Yeon-woo tilted his head like he didn't understand. I suggested it, and you rejected me, right? Then I think we're done now. Frisia gazed at Yeon-woo with still eyes. She couldn't tell what Yeon-woo was thinking. Most people would try to convince her or ask her to look over the proposal at least. Was he thinking that she might suddenly become interested if he acted like this? However, the Yeon-woo that Frisia had investigated wasn't someone that simple. His image as the hoarder was so violent and evil that players described him as a dole starved for blood. Frisia thought differently. Said badly, he was violent, but if said nicely, it meant he knew to wait. He had the determination of snatching up his prey at the appropriate timing. He knew when to leave and enter, and his judgment was deep. At the same time, he had rapid growth and the one-horned tribe backing him up. She judged that he wouldn't do childish games like this. She had also come here to see what kind of person he was, so Frisia decided to take a step back. We can still talk for a little longer. Right. Frisia tossed the question, and Yeon-woo quietly sat down. His eyes beyond his mask were as hard to read as her poker face. However, Yeon-woo only wanted something simple. It was nice if things went well, but nothing could be done if they didn't. What Yeon-woo wanted was a fair and reasonable contract with by the table. Even if he wanted a sponsorship, he had no intention of being controlled by them. He was planning on paying them back for what he received. And if it was the leader of By the Table, he thought she would know about the path he was trying to take as well. If she was looking for a king, there was no reason for her to let him go. He was correct. Jeong-woo said she was looking for something among people who are kings. He was right. Yeon-woo gazed at Frisia's eyes. I'll ask a few questions. Please go ahead. I heard you received a few of the Summer Queen's storage rooms. Why are you asking us to sponsor you when you have all that money? Yeon-woo inwardly clicked his tongue. He hadn't told even the Fanti siblings that he received Intrinian as a reward. It was because he thought nothing good would come out of people knowing. The inheritance of the Summer Queen. There would definitely be an astronomical amount of money left in a storage room of a draconic species, so people would be interested. However, Frisia was asking like it was obvious. That was how well connected By the Table was. Yeon-woo nodded his head, not planning on hiding it. I don't have it. It was unexpected. Frisia's eyes widened. What? I already used it all. Her widened eyes became even bigger. It was the first change in emotion Frisia showed. That was how shocking what Yeon-woo said was. He had already used the Summer Queen's inheritance. In less than a year? I sold everything inside Intrinian other than what I needed, and I spent all that money already as well. He could hear someone gasping behind him. Frisia turned to look. Atron was shaking while muttering "crazy bastard" to himself. He had sold everything secretly on the black market in Yeon-woo's place, so he knew how much Yeon-woo had. He didn't know how much exactly, but it was probably enough for a large clan to use for several years. He couldn't imagine where Yeon-woo had used all of that. However, the money that would have been enough for others wasn't enough for Yeon-woo. To create a dungeon, restore the outer space, restructure a large-scale lab, and make his own smithy, he didn't have enough. Ho ho! Ho! Frisia burst out laughing. Atron was surprised once more. He had never seen the leader laugh either. Then, the laughter suddenly stopped. Her eyes were as cunning as a snake. She opened her mouth. It seems you spend as much as you use you want to swallow up. Frisia couldn't help but be amazed at how Yeon-woo had spent such a large amount of money, even for By the Table. She saw what Yeon-woo was after. The tower. Yeon-woo was trying to swallow this world. He was very avaricious. Avarice without consumption stopped at just greed, but with consumption, it became ambition. Frisia liked that avarice. She didn't know if he would become a moth drawn to a flame or a spider, but whatever happened, he was definitely going to become something. And the amount you need. The more the better. It'll probably dry up soon. Yuri saying you'll use it like you use tap water. Frisia laughed. It was a laugh that looked like both an ordinary laugh and a mocking laugh. I can see what you're trying to do without asking you. And the clan members? Have you chosen? I have a few people in mind. They're not shallow, If I was going to pick those people, I wouldn't have used up all of the Summer Queen's inheritance in the first place. Fine. We'll sponsor you. Frisia nodded her head firmly. You can talk about the details with Atran. Atran was surprised at the sudden mention. Frisia narrowed her eyes. Why? Is it too much? If so, I won't force you. Atran quickly bowed on the floor. And no. Thank you for giving me this chance. Frisia nodded her head. You couldn't tell her no. She made the impossible possible. Yeon-woo tsked inwardly as he watched her. She was pretending to be calm on the outside, but she was an investor who took risks. She didn't ask what he needed, details about the sponsorship, or anything else. She just handed everything over to Atran. It also meant that she was confident she could handle whatever scale he asked for. Was everyone at her level like that? He didn't know how much she could handle. There was one word that came to his mind when he saw people like that. King. Frisia was someone who had the potential of a ruler/sovereign. She might have thought that to work with her, you needed to have the same qualifications as her. Yeon-woo was amused that he was acknowledged by her. At the very least, he wasn't an older brother who lost to his little sibling. SWA. Just then, the light of Frisia's form started to scatter. It's already time. Oh, before I go, let me say this. Frisia spoke calmly with the eyes of an intellectual. I am your average investor. I don't ever do things that will hurt me. Also, that's how expensive my money is. So if you think that you can't pay me back, even the interest. Frisia didn't continue. She was telling him to figure it out on his own. He knew her wealth and connections, so Yeon-woo nodded his head. The white wolf stood up. Frisia stroked the white wolf's head as she jumped on top of him. She was about to return in the direction she came from. Yeon-woo asked the last question. Is Yeol doing well? Yeol. The white wolf stopped. Right before Frisia disappeared, she tilted her head as her eyes glittered. Ah! That furry! He's doing well. Did you send him to the garden? Frisia looked at Yeon-woo strangely. Then, she grinned, shaking her head. This is my first time being tested whether or not we're qualified to sponsor someone. However, I hope you don't do things like this from now on so there aren't any misunderstandings. With that, it was over. Atran frantically looked back at Yeon-woo. He had become a weed of by the table. It was an honor for a mysterious merchant, but he was still shocked. He was also filled with questions. Yeol? Who's that? He seemed to want to ask a lot of things, but Yeon-woo just shook his head and didn't answer. Instead, he grinned under his mask. The child who hadn't been able to do anything back in the tutorial. The scared body who had his thorns raised. Yeon-woo still remembered how he said thanks and called him Hyung at the end. He had been curious about how he was doing, but he was able to hear news about him like this. It was a relief he seemed to be doing better than what he thought. *******. The 98th floor. The land of mystery that no player had approached. However, this was where the gods and demons lived. It was divided into two large regions, but it was split into countless societies, so it could fall apart any minute. In Olympus, one of the larger societies, Hermes was meeting his beautiful sister, Athena. However, Athena had a slightly stiff face unlike his easygoing one. "It seems like our foolish uncle has made the decision to kill that child." Her voice was filled with annoyance. There were undertones of a deep disappointment. It was because of what their uncle, Poseidon, was trying to do. Chapter 260 Growth, 10. Team, HH, Thursdays, Yahiko, 2/12. The player who mocked the gods will receive a godly punishment. That was the order Poseidon suddenly gave to his servants. Athena, who had eyes and ears all over Olympus, had heard about it. It was obvious who that player was. Cha Yeon-woo. It was someone Athena was looking after with great interest. Since Poseidon said that such a child would be hurt, of course she would go looking for Hermes with an angry face. Grin. Hermes unintentionally laughed when he saw his sister. She must have been annoyed at his reaction. She raised an eyebrow and glared at Hermes. "What's so funny?" "Nothing. It's just that I've never seen you this flustered." Athena furrowed her eyebrows. She shut her mouth and didn't say anything. It was hilarious to Hermes. Actually, although Hermes had met Yeon-woo often, Athena had never contacted him other than when Yeon-woo sacrificed Aegis. But still, Athena cherished Yeon-woo like a child of her own. No, like her own apostle. Since he knew the reason why, he didn't say much about it, but it was still interesting to see the goddess of war, one who made the demons shiver in fear, acting like this. What kind of faces would their siblings make? Their father? Of course, their father was in a deep sleep, so he didn't know the situation outside. Thanks to that, we can act like this. Hermes spoke as he organized his thoughts. Don't be too rushed, sister. We know that child better than anyone. Hermes crinkled his eyes. He's a child who turned Agars into rags. He has a few sly allies inside him, like the boa constrictors that I raise. We can just sit back and watch uncle suffer. If he needs help, we can help him then. Must be nice to be so carefree. Athena snorted as she left Hermes's residence. Hermes smiled sourly and watched his sister leave. But there's nothing we can do, sister. We can't do anything here. The same goes for uncle. The damned system. An Alforoni, who deserved to suffer more than death. Hermes muttered to himself, sighing. Then, he turned around and closed his eyes. As he was locked into the consciousness of his real body, a new view opened. There, he could see Yeon-woo moving. Hermes suddenly became curious about how many gods and demons were using this view to observe Yeon-woo right now. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. I hope this is enough. The head elder put his brush down on the ink's tone. He had looked at the book for so long that his eyes were tired. He rubbed his eyes, but the feeling didn't go away. Actually, this tiredness wasn't physical tiredness. For that, all he had to do was circulate the energy around him to feel better. But mental tiredness wasn't something that could be that easily taken care of. This was all because he had been writing a Mujong book that he hadn't planned on writing. A writing of divination that the head elder had learned back during his younger days. He had spoken coldly to Fanti, but the head elder began to organize all of his information into a scroll for him. However, it wasn't an easy process. It was a formless strong energy that the head elder used just through concepts, so he didn't know where to start. On the other hand, it was something he wanted to do because of that. The head elder had been completely absorbed by Mujong when he was younger, and when he was older, he had missed the chance to get married because he was studying. He didn't have any successors because he didn't have time for a disciple. All people wanted to leave a trace of themselves behind when they left the world, so he had been thinking of searching for a successor soon anyhow. Fanti had whined at him to teach him. Still, the head elder couldn't easily give it away, so he touched Fanti's pride, but he had entered closed training, and hadn't left since. It meant that he had tenacity in addition to his current potential. The head elder would have to check for himself when Fanti escaped the Myunbyeok building, but he had pretty much passed now. The head elder began writing with a light heart, but things didn't go as he hoped. He realized that it was hard to write about the concepts in his head. However, going over his thoughts cleared his head, and his understanding of blood lightning was deeper once he was almost finished. Now, all he had to worry about was how to give this to Fanti. I don't want to because I can already see his reaction. All members of the tribe acknowledged that the person most like the Martial King's younger days was Fanti. Once he received it, he would probably cause all kinds of commotion because he was so happy. The head elder was the one who suffered the most because of the Martial King. Just when he was wondering how to give it to Fanti quietly. Fanti will be happy when he sees it. The head elder got to attention at the sudden voice. Yeon-woo had been standing in front of him for some time. Even though he was deep in thought, he hadn't felt someone come up to him. The head elder spoke with widened eyes. When did you come? I called for you several times outside. There wasn't any answer, so I just came in. Sorry if I was rude. It's fine. We're all one family. I feel like it's been a while since I've seen you. The head elder looked Yeon-woo up and down strangely. After Yeon-woo was finished with Galliard's training, he almost never went outside. However, the Martial King, the head elder, nor the other members of the tribe went to ask how he was doing. The One-Horn tribe members had experience with holding themselves up to go over things, so they just thought he was busy with things too. Rather, they wondered how he had come out so quickly. Also, Yeon-woo seemed quite different from before. He was sturdier and heavier. Before, he had exuded a sharp aura, like he was going to explode any moment, but now, it was completely settled to the point that it was calm. He's done it so fast. It seems like he's found his path. He won't stumble even if he adds other things on. However, it also occurred to him that it would be hard for Yeon-woo to climb higher from where he was. Still, he was proud that Yeon-woo was now at an expert level where he could use strong energy. But why are you here? If you're looking for the tribe leader, he's probably in his office. I already went to greet Seseong-nim. Then, could I know where Eudora is? Unlike Fanti, Eudora was climbing the floors. He just heard that Eudora had passed the 30th floor some time ago, but he didn't know what happened after that. Yeon-woo's communication artifact was broken. He hadn't fixed it because he was busy training. She came here some time ago. She's probably on the 36th floor. Yeon-woo's eyes flashed. She's made a lot of progress. She's also become pretty skilled. The Yang sword is settling in. Yeon-woo smiled faintly. The other side of the Yang sword, the Yin sword. When would he be able to unlock that? But why Eudora suddenly? I can contact her if you need. Yeon-woo shook her head. It's fine. There's no rush, and I can meet her up there. Ah. Then are you? The head elder's eyes widened, realizing what Yeon-woo was trying to go. Yeon-woo nodded his head heavily. Yes. I'm officially starting again. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Yeon-woo finished his goodbyes to the One-Horn tribe with the head elder. After he made a contract with By the Table, he had already finished everything he needed to set up a clan. Now there was only one thing left. The Summer Queen. Yeon-woo left the head elder's residence and headed to Boo's dungeon. The dungeon had changed a lot since the last time he was there, and the difference was visible from the entrance. Skeleton warriors in armor kneeled. The master of their master. It was their respect for such a high being. As he walked along the path, many undead stopped what they were doing to bow to Yeon-woo. They were like citizens greeting their king. Clip, clop. Boo arrived with skeleton knights on ghost horses in tow. It was an incredible change considering how it had been filled with lower-level ghosts at the beginning. Yeon-woo was surprised. After he left the dungeon to Boo, he hadn't paid any attention to it. The armor of the skeleton knights all shined. They were things they stole from the Summer Queen's armory. Have you arrived? As Buddha bowed to Yeon-woo, the skeleton knights got off their horses to kneel to Yeon-woo. When he looked closely, he could see mages, shamans, lancers, and others behind the knights. Also, there were golems, zombies, ghouls, banshees, and specters. It seemed like he had brought all the undeads that were spread out in the dungeon. Everywhere he looked, he could see a respective greeting of the undead. However, to Yeon-woo, it wasn't a respectful sight but ridiculous instead. What's all this? Of course. It's for you. Since our master has come. Stop it. It's over the top. Do what you normally do. Accepting your orders. Bu nodded and waved his hand in the air. As he did, the undead stood back up and returned to where they were. Yeon-woo sighed. It was nice since Bu could do more things as he became stronger, but on the other hand, he was embarrassed because Bu overreacted sometimes. Still, it wasn't a bad thing. It was kind of fun being served like that. Yeon-woo just wanted him not to cross the line. What about the work? We've reached the middle. Let's go. By work, he was talking about making a bone dragon. Yeon-woo entered the center of the dungeon with Bu. They had split Intrinian into an outer section, middle section, and center section. The deeper he went, the higher the level of the undead, and he could occasionally see a demonic beast or ghost beast flying around. The dungeon was a complex maze. If you took a wrong turn, you would easily lose your way, and there were different kinds of magic circles and traps set up for defense. He could see how much effort Bu had placed into making the dungeon. When he arrived at the center section, the long and narrow maze was gone. There, the Summer Queen's corpse lay on top of a large magic circle. However, its color was a lot different than before. It had been red as rubies, but it was completely black now. It was because they injected Devil King poison to mature the corpse. Clack, clack. Tack tack. Countless skeletons were taking apart the corpse with sharp knives. The scales were so strong that they had to be careful during the process. It was a relief that the skeletons didn't have any thoughts of their own, they couldn't make any mistakes because they only did as they were ordered to. There was someone else who was ordering them. Be careful. It can't be damaged in the slightest. Separate what you already split. Rebecca showed an energetic side to her as she ran around the skeletons. Fitting of a hunter, she made sure not to waste her experience. Shannon and Han Ryeong stepped up to do what the skeletons couldn't do. On one side, Hanova was leading a skeleton squad to do something Yeon-woo ordered. His touch was needed the most. Next to him, Brahm was helping. Ananta wasn't completely healed yet, but she was getting better, so he did small things on the side. Yeon-woo passed them to where the Summer Queen was sitting blankly. She had to watch her body being dismembered bound in divine iron. Her face was dark, and she was powerless. She had come a long way down from where she was. Ismenios. Yeon-woo approached the Summer Queen's side. She looked blankly at her corpse and slowly looked up at Yeon-woo. She hadn't completely lost herself yet. I guess it's time now. The Summer Queen smiled coldly. She had realized how her last moments would be. Yeon-woo slowly took his mask off. He didn't deny it. Yes. Are you satisfied? Of course. Yeon-woo smiled faintly. His eyes turned cold. As his eyes opened vertically, they shined like those of a snake going after its prey. Ha ha. Ha ha ha. Sure. Revenge. If that's what you were after, you did well. Very. Only Alforoni made me like this. But Alforoni was always that kind of guy, and it's amazing that you were able to make me like this. The Summer Queen burst out laughing. All this time, she had always been the predator. But now, she was prey in front of Yeon-woo. So this was how it felt. The Summer Queen giggled. Most people in front of her cried and begged. But strangely, she didn't know how to express that feeling. The Summer Queen just laughed. She could only think that the last dragon was now disappearing. She closed her eyes. She had given up a long time ago. She didn't want to show fear. That moment. Ah! The Summer Queen realized what the way of thinking that Cha Jeong-woo also spoke of was. The greed that she always had to be the best. The curse of being lonely was only being lifted. But if you can release that curse, you'll be able to see new things. Then, I'll help you, Ismenios. Call for me anytime. Wasn't this what Cha Jeong-woo had been speaking about? Yeon-woo put his hand atop of the Summer Queen's and activated Bathory's vampiric sword. The Summer Queen's weak soul began to flow into Yeon-woo. Walk! A fire began to blaze above Yeon-woo's body.